for his remarks.
All right. Good morning. Thank you for being here. As you know, we've been doing this for a couple of months now, and our only intent is to actually have access to the media, access to the public, and you guys having access to some of us. There's been a lot of stories written about the freshmen and about the conservatives in the House. And I think the best way for us to have a good communication is for us to be accessible. Sometimes I believe conservatives are afraid to talk to the media, and I think that's a mistake because the only way we can tell our story is by speaking to you. So thank you for being here, and we just want to answer any questions, anything that you may have. I just wonder if any other members of the panel have anything pressing that they would like to say. All right. Thank you. We'll take any questions.
Yes. David Grant, Christian Science Monitor. This morning we had your colleague, Congressman Sessions, at breakfast, and he said that the Tea Party, who's speaking of Senator Lugar, were very energized all over the country, and that he had actually seen impact in terms of holding people accountable when he and Congressman Walden were rounding up votes on the House floor. I was just sort of curious if you guys could talk a little bit about how you felt that the grassroots have held you all accountable and maybe held some of your colleagues accountable over the last year and a half.
You know, my experience has been, as I go back to the district, what people are really concerned about is mostly whether you're keeping the promises that you made. In my district, which is a very conservative district, they're kind of tired of politicians coming to Washington, D.C. and what, you know, the phrase that I have heard is that they speak like conservatives, but they act like moderates. And what they actually prefer in some cases is for us to speak like moderates and act like conservatives, actually keep the promises that we made to our constituents. So in my opinion, we are being held accountable. I know that I'm held accountable. Every time I go to the store, you know, I have a family, I have 5 kids, so I still go to basketball games, football games, volleyball games. I go to the Costco, all the different places. And the people in the district hold me accountable and they ask me specific questions about votes. They seem to be very informed. I don't know what it was like for members of Congress before, but in my experience, they know the specific votes that I have taken. They can tell me where they disagree with me on specific issues, and they just want some accountability. And sometimes they're okay if they disagree with you, but they want you to be able to voice why you voted a certain way. Jeff?
You know, I'm reminded of a quote Ronald Reagan had, that we should carry a banner of pale pastels, but one of bold colors, which make it unmistakably clear where we stand on the issues. And I think every one of us at this dais carry that banner of bold colors. We are bold, we're unabashed about our conservatism, and we don't mind talking about that, hence we're here. So I think there's more need for boldness in America, not only in Congress, but in America, about what you believe in, what you stand for, and return to conservatism. So I yield back.
During the last 16 months, I've done 119 town halls, and always the toughest question is, what's the difference of you going up there, Congressman Huelskamp, from the state of Kansas? And that's a great question. If you look across there, we are approaching a $15.8 trillion debt. We run our 4th straight year of $1 trillion deficits. What we're talking about, maybe cutting margins, cutting the budgets at the margins, and that's a really good question. It's a hard question to tell folks that care about the future of the country, say, what's changed? It's nice to say out here, well, we changed the debate, but they're looking for results. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for actual budget cuts, and I'll just tell you, it hasn't happened yet. I think we assure ourselves at least we changed the debate, but that's not good enough when you go out to borrow money. You still got to borrow the money. And so we've got a long ways to go, but the people have a right to be skeptical. The last time Washington actually cut its budget year to year was the year of Elvis's first album. And so Republicans and Democrats alike have not followed through, and that's what I hear from my folks. They're skeptical. And I tell you, if we don't deliver here pretty shortly, doing something pretty bold, they're going to ask for a new crop of folks up here. I really believe.
Yeah, I don't really remember Elvis, but
I've heard about it.
I've heard about him. But yeah, Tim brought up a lot of good points, and Raúl and Jeff. What people care about is accountability. They want to see that we're being held accountable, and I've held a lot more town halls than my predecessor held. I'm posting every vote I take on Facebook. That's one way to be held accountable. Other people are doing similar things. So that's what people want to see. at the end of the day, the public is more concerned that we are sticking to our guns, that we're doing what we say we're going to do, and that we're not misleading them. They care less about what your particular positions are on a particular issue. They care more about, are you being honest with them, were you straightforward with them when you were running for office, and are you doing what you said you do?
If I might add, they also are frustrated by the failure of Republicans to take advantage of opportunities. They get it when we pass legislation in the House that the Senate has said they're never going to take up. They get that that means it will not become law. So it may make us feel better, but it doesn't become law because they understand you have to use leverage to get another body controlled by a different party to pass the thing that you passed. And each time we crept up to real leverage to get the Senate to do something helpful for America, we walk away from forcing the issue. And I would give you an example as something that if we pushed it in the House strongly enough, it would either be passed by the Senate or it would cause some senators to be defeated. And that is what we have done. I don't see it in the press, but we, with the help of the freshmen coming in, as conservative as they were, we, over the last year and this year, have cut our budgets 5% plus and 6% plus, a total of over 11%. Now, when you're looking at just the House budget cut of 11%, it's a drop in the bucket for the nation. But if we use that as the moral authority to demand that the Senate do the same thing unless they're too good for the rest of America, and we kept hammering that issue through our leadership and through negotiations, we could get that passed, that every federal agency, department in the U.S. government has to do what the House has done, cut their budget over 11% over a 2-year period. We have the moral authority to demand it because we've done it, but instead we just did it as a nice thing to do and have not forced the issue. I'm grateful the freshmen are here because that's how we got this done. But until we force the issue, people back home are not really satisfied we've done anything significant.
Thank you. And for the record, I remember Elvis. He was up back when I was a little boy, and I've watched every one of his movies.
Can I ask a question for a moment about Senator Lugar's defeat yesterday? There's a lot of consternation. Some say, well, this could possibly be what happened in 2010, where a very conservative Senate candidate was nominated, a Tea Party candidate, Sharon Angle, what happened in Delaware, so on, and that this could cause the Democrats to retain the Senate if Joe Donnelly is able to defeat.
It's a tremendous question, but we had a chance to talk with Senator DeMint on a regular basis, and I asked him about that. And he said, look, candidates still count. Where we had good conservative candidates, Marco Rubio, Mike Lee, we won. When we had folks like Sharon Angle and O'Donnell, we lost. Mr. Murdoch is a great candidate. This is a guy who's won statewide election before. He's going to be somebody who can carry the banner for the conservative movement in Congress. So no, I think it still comes down to candidates, but we got a really good one last night in the Indiana race.
And I'd like to add, I am not a witch.
You know, I think what we oh, this was not working.
Here you go.
I think what we're seeing in America is a recognition that people are recognizing that over the last 10 years, Democrats and Republicans have both had opportunities in complete control of this government. And what problems did they solve? Are they creating more problems than they're solving? I challenge people in town halls to tell me any problem that they've solved in the last 10 years. But the one common theme over those last 10 years has been the people in certain leadership positions around here. And so the question is begged as to whether or not we're fighting for the American people or fighting over the checkbook. And so this becomes a credibility issue. And so I think that the election last night is a testament to that. And if the people of Indiana believe that Mr. Murdoch's credibility in solving problems is going to get them further down the road, then I have no doubt that he will win on election day.
And if I can follow up on that, accountability, though. And you have Dick Lugar, who, you know, was author of the Nunn-Lugar Act, you know, was well known as a senator who worked across the aisle. I mean, is there a suggestion that he was not credible? It didn't have, I mean, or was it the issue of his conservative credentials?
It's part and parcel of the whole, Chad. I mean, regardless, if you can reach across, just because you can reach across the aisle doesn't mean you're solving the problem. We have to solve the problems. We can't just consistently say, well, we're going to reach across the aisle on the little things. Americans are looking for us to do the big things, to make this nation exceptional again. And the only way we do it is by getting our spending under control and getting this economy back up and moving. And evidently, they haven't been able to do that. And I think that the voters respond to those messages at the polls.
And Chad, if you think about it, the narrative that the Tea Party candidates did not win is false. If you look at Rand Paul and Marco Rubio, when they first started running, they were supposed to be Senate candidates who could not win. And in fact, the establishment got behind their opponents and they said that these two individuals could not win. And I can give you Mike Lee, I can give you many others. The reality is that many Tea Party candidates won in the Senate and many Tea Party candidates lost in the Senate. It doesn't mean that being a more conservative candidate makes you a loser or a winner. I completely agree that it's whether you're a good candidate. If you recall my race, I was not supposed to win the primary or the general election. I was told again and again that there was no way that I could win. So it's about the candidate. It's not necessarily about whether you're a Tea Party or not. And I think Mr. Murdoch will have a very easy time winning, especially in a state like Indiana, which the key is that Obama's going to lose that state and he's going to lose it big because his policies have failed and have specifically failed in Indiana.
We have a question here from Siobhan Hughes from Dow Jones. Governor Romney has proposed limiting tax breaks for high-income earners. Pat Toomey did that last year, and the president has said he wants the same thing. Republicans say they would use the savings to lower marginal tax rates, but Obama would use it for deficit reduction. Where do conservatives stand on the issue?
Well, first on the question, Obama does not want to use it for deficit reduction. He wants to use it for more government. He wants to increase government. But what everybody needs to understand is, at least the conservatives in the House, we do want to eliminate a lot of the loopholes. In fact, the RSC budget and many of the proposals that we have had at the Republican Study Committee suggest that we should get rid of all these loopholes that are creating a big disparity in America. So most of us want a fair, flat tax system that allows the loopholes to go away and actually just broaden the base and lower the rates for all Americans. And that's the main difference between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats keep saying that they want to increase taxes so they can spend more on government. And our problem here in Washington, D.C. is not government spending.
Well, it is important for people like the questioner to also understand that you can't just listen to what the president says. It's more helpful to look at the hard language he's proposed. He says he's going after millionaires and billionaires, and as a result, he proposed in writing his bill. You look at what he proposed, taxes go up on anybody making more than $125,000 if you're married, $200,000 to $225,000 if you're not married. So he says millionaires and billionaires, and then he goes after people that are not anywhere near that. He said he was going after big oil. You look at the specific proposals that he's made. He eliminates critical deductions for independent oil and gas operators who drill and maintain 95% of the oil and gas wells in the continental United States. That will put them out of business. Talk to independents. These specific proposals he made will put them out of business, which means major oil will make more profit because there's nobody in competition. Then he says he's going after the fat cats on Wall Street. You look at what he's done, and this has come out this week. Wall Street has made more money, and there have been less prosecutions for crimes on Wall Street than any time in the last 20 years. It's like there's a nod and a wink with Wall Street. Look, I'll call you fat cats and say I'm coming after you, but I'll put your buddies in the Department of Justice like never before, and they'll cover you. You won't get prosecuted. You'll make more money than ever. So don't just look at what he said. Look at what he has done.
Yes.
Katie O'Donnell, National Journal. The Sequester Replacement Act that accompanies the reconciliation bill suggests that Republicans would accept the 1.047 trillion rate of spending through the fall and basically put off the spending fight until after the election. Would conservatives get behind that, or do you want to push for the 1.028 trillion level of funding in the continuing resolution?
I would just say, if you're doing a CR, frankly, CR should be at 1043. I mean, that's what we're spending now. So this idea, it may be somewhat semantical, and I know it's just $4 billion, but $4 billion is still a step in the right direction of savings for the taxpayer. So if we're going to do a CR, it seems to me that it should be short term, and it should be at the current level of spending, because that's what a CR is. Obviously, the Democrats want to be at 1047. Harry Reid said that. They've passed their language over there to do that. I think it remains to be seen. But I think a lot of conservatives are going to have real problems with spending levels at 1047.
Sure.
We saw House conservatives, early last year, really forcing the issue in Congressman Gohmert's words. More recently, we've heard from the leadership that there's a certain number of conservatives who they don't expect to vote for any bill that has anything to do with spending, and a lot of you are on that, informal list. What's
Can we
the
see the list?
Have you got the list? It's not a specific list, but if you look at the voting boards, you guys are consistently voting against any spending bills. So what is the risk to you that you just end up marginalized even within the House Republican conference if the leadership is just going to move on without you?
Well, if I could quickly just, I would disagree with the premise. The vast majority of folks on this dais are, voted for every single appropriation bill that was passed last year out of the House, because we just did. We helped with the budget. We set the number. 302A number, the 302B numbers, we supported those bills that did pass. What we didn't support is when you throw it all together in a big omnibus or minibus or CR, whatever it's been being called at the time, where you're increasing spending. But we did support those, and it was this group of folks who wanted to say, let's stand strong for the House position, our budget, the appropriation bills we as conservatives supported, and then somehow no, we have to go to something higher. So that's where the rub came. Most of us supported those appropriation bills, and I think many of us on this dais are going to support the CJS bill if it's tomorrow or next Tuesday, because frankly it's back at 08 levels. We're offering our amendments. We understand we got a $16 trillion debt and we should cut more spending and provide more savings for taxpayers. But in the end, I think many of us are going to support the legislation.
But Jim, I think what's important is this, the CJS bill is an open rule. We're able to have an input, and a lot of us have been advocating all of last year about regular order, about giving us the opportunity to amend bills on the House floor, to send a Republican stamped legislation over to the Senate, show the juxtaposition between a conservative House and a Senate that's very liberal, that wants to grow government and spend more tax dollars. So, we're advocating for more regular order.
The one other thing I would add too is, when we said this, we were the ones defending the Ryan budget numbers last year, the ones that passed. My guess is many of us will be the ones defending the sequester savings amount. We'll want to do it differently, but in the end, we'll be the ones saying, we said this back during the budget debate. You all voted for the sequester, we didn't. We thought it was a bad package. Frankly, we've turned out, I think when you look at what's happened with the failure of the super committee and everything else, but we said we're the ones fighting for what you all voted for. We think, because we think, the situation warrants, we got to cut spending.
We were also the ones defending the Pledge to America with $100 billion rollback and then spending at 2008 levels. So, we're actually trying to go back to the original point. What do we want back home here? We're actually doing what we said we were going to do. That's what this group is doing last year.
Get somebody from this side. There's a couple of people raising their hand.
Hi, I'm Rich Cohen with Congressional Quarterly. I want to ask you about a bill that will be on the floor in a couple hours, the Exim Bank bill. Maybe first briefly, how many of you, with a show of hands, plan to vote against the bill? I see several, so maybe a majority. What's the problem with the bill, and what is the opposition of the several of you, what does that say about how the majority party, this is a bill negotiated by Leader Cantor, what does your opposition say about how things are going? At least, what does this bill tell you?
Hold on a second, before we get into that, they got the votes, right?
I'm sorry?
This is coming up on a suspension. This is the question I keep asking. Why does everybody make a big deal over how we're voting on the Exim Bank? They're bringing it up on a suspension. The reason you bring things up on suspension is you know you have the votes. We went to our leadership, in fact, conservatives in both the House and the Senate went to the leadership on both bodies and said, look, here's some conservative reforms. And we're told very politely on both sides of the building, thanks very much, but we don't need your votes. So, I mean, I'm just assuming they got the votes, right? They must know what they're doing, or else they would be doing it.
And what does their failure to take your reforms tell you?
That they have the votes necessary.
Does that?
That's logical, isn't it? I mean, if you say, look, here's what you need to get my vote, and they say, thanks, we don't need your vote, that means they don't need our votes.
Does that concern you?
Does it concern me that we're negotiating with the Democrats? I mean, we've been doing that for the last 16 months. Does it concern me? Yes. Surprise me, not really.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier about regular order, about us having input in the process and really showing the juxtaposition between, the difference between conservatives and liberals.
And just one correction, for you, it's been going on 16 months. But actually, it precedes 16 months. In fact, you can go to 17 months when in December, we had just had the biggest wave election in history since the 1930s. And what happened was the Republicans caved and gave the Democrats the biggest spending lame duck session in the history of the country. And as Thad McConnell pointed out, that's like Custer saying, quick boys, let's attack the Indians before all our own reinforcements get here. You know, it didn't make a lot of sense, but it goes beyond 16 months.
We have a question from Twitter. Someone asked if Congress can essentially skip a budget for 3 years, then could it also skip the balanced budget portion of a balanced budget amendment? And if so, what's the point of having the amendment?
Well, obviously it depends on how the amendment's written. If you write it strong enough, the supermajority vote to get out of it, active war, you know, those kind of things. It depends on how tightly you've written it. Obviously, we would be advocates for pretty tightly stringent written balanced budget amendment, and maybe even tweaking it. I know Congressman Amash has got an idea that seems to be a little simpler to deal with in the way we do it. So a lot of us are looking at that concept. But what we do know we need is some requirements to make Congress do what everyone else has to do.
Well, and I think the American people hold people accountable. The Democrats are going to be held accountable in the Senate for not having a budget for 3 years. They will be held accountable, and it doesn't matter what the media says. The Republicans will take over the Senate, and it's just going to happen because they're not doing what they're supposed to do under their constitutional authority. If we vote against a balanced budget, even though there's a balanced budget amendment in place, the American people will hold us accountable. Sorry.
I would add, I think at the end of the day, that a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution is a lot easier for the public to understand than some of the other requirements that are placed on Congress. It's easy to tell if one party starts saying, hey, we're not following this. I think it's easier for the public to hold people accountable than with a lot of other provisions.
And just like Jim said, though, if it's written tightly enough, you can have enforcement mechanisms in there. And as I recall, there were 4 of us that voted against the balanced budget amendment that came to the floor. It didn't have a spending cap. It wasn't easily enforced. I think, Dustin, didn't you vote against that and Paul Rampant? But it was not tightly enough written, so it would have been unenforceable. And some of us want, just like Jim's talking about, we want the tight enforcement in there so it can be if Congress doesn't do the job.
Sure. Yeah, back here, could we just have Mark and Jim?
Mark Tapscott with the Examiner. Thank you, Congressman. Tom Coburn says in his new book, The Debt Problem, that we've got 2, maybe 3 or 4 years max before the economy shuts down. Do you guys think that's an accurate estimate? And if you do, what does that mean for conservatives going forward after that? Is anybody making any systematic planning for that?
I think it's absolutely true, and I think for conservatives and for Republicans in the House and the Senate, I predict, and you know, all of you are going to hold me accountable if I don't, I'm not right. I predict that we're going to keep the House, we're going to win the Senate, and we're possibly going to take the presidency. But at a minimum, we're going to have the House and the Senate. If we don't do what we are promising the American people to do, which is to completely change America in the next 2 years, when we have control of both houses, the American people will hold us accountable, and I'm afraid that the Republican Party could go the way of the Whig Party. Because I think the American people are fed up with both parties. They're fed up with what's happening in America, and they're fed up with people making empty promises. And this is my warning to Republicans. that you better take it seriously, because when I go back to my home district, they're not talking about Republicans are the ones who do everything right, or Democrats are the ones that do everything wrong. They're saying that politicians in general do everything wrong, and they're fed up with politicians that are looking for statesmen, people who go out there and actually keep their word, people who go out there and make tough decisions that will actually may even put them in jeopardy in the re-election. That's what they're looking for. And if we're not willing to do that in the next 2 years, I think it's going to be bad for America, and it's also going to be bad politically for Republicans.
To follow up on that, Mark, and I serve on the budget committee, and based on the economists we've heard in there, a wide variety would suggest the time is shorter than the period you indicate, and that's what frustrates me, because when we were having the budget debate when we first arrived, they had no budget. And the freshmen come walking in the door, we're supposed to help solve this, and talk about cutting $100 billion, and I remember a colleague of mine says, well, we're going to do the best we can, but until we actually have 51 votes in the Senate, we really can't get anything done. Then later as well, once we get 60 votes in the Senate, in the following election, we might be able to get something done. But then we have to have the president. The economy can't wait. That $1 trillion deficit we're running every cannot wait, and that's what I think distinguishes many of us here to our colleagues that have been here a while. They think we have a lot more time to solve these problems. And looking at the economic reality, I don't think we have. And so we're pushing as hard as we can, because I think we're afraid of the future of our nation because of those economic numbers.
And if I might add to that, what I found astounding is when I was talking to a colleague of ours on the other side of the aisle, I said, well, this has been coming because this is not new. You haven't heard it before. And we were talking about Medicare and Social Security and how do we reform these programs to make sure that our current seniors aren't harmed and our future seniors who are paying into the system get what they are expecting at the end of that time frame. And the comment made to me was, well, they've been saying that all this time, all these years. They keep saying that every year. And I thought, well, aren't you concerned that 1 year might really be the year? We really need to start addressing these issues for the American people. And that's what they sent us here to do, is address the issues now, not wait for when it does come to that tipping point where we have got to make those decisions, and they're going to be a lot harder and a lot more cumbersome on those very people that we are trying currently today to make sure aren't harmed as much. And that is our current seniors. And that's why when you hear about all these political talk about what we're doing, let's go back to the policy talks and make sure that what we're doing is the right thing for the American people. And that's how come all of us, and this is why we do what we do, it's not for us, it's for the generations that are coming behind us. And for the people that have entrusted us, those seniors who have seen and read all these years, and apparently they get it, but some of the members who have been here so long don't get it. And that's what is important to the American people, and they're going to hold us accountable, and I hope they do.
Well, this is a group of people who's working hard to make sure that in 2 or 3 years, we're not looking at y'all and saying, we told you. Okay? I mean, think about that. We don't want to be here in 3 years and say, look, all of the stuff that we put out here, all the policies and the cuts and the measurement and the policies that we felt would put us in line to fiscal sanity needed to be done. And then we had that calamity point. Believe you me, I'd rather be on this side of the table than be where other members are if that day comes.
Yeah, it's very hard to predict exactly when the collapse will happen, but we're definitely on a dangerous trajectory. And I think it's going to require some bold leadership, particularly on the part of Republicans, to speak truthfully to the American people about where we're headed. When we have deals that cut 1% of the budget, we can't call them historic. That's misleading. We need to be honest with the American people about the kind of cuts we need to make to get this budget balanced. And we can't raise taxes enough to balance the budget. It's not possible. There has to be spending cuts.
And if I might add too, Peter Marshall prayed in the 1940s in the Senate mentioning that, Lord, what we consider crises, you see as opportunities. We've got the President of the United States out saying if you make more, you need to pay more. We got everybody saying in America the tax system is broken. This is a great opportunity to say, you know what? Flat tax. Everybody who makes more will pay more. You make less, you pay less. It's a flat tax across the board. Everybody will have, as people keep saying too much around here, some skin in the game. It's fair. This ought to be the opportunity that we seize and we push through a complete reform and give America some faith that Congress can actually do something effective. And instead we're talking about, you know, adjusting this knob, pulling this lever a little bit. It's time to make this the opportunity it is.
And I actually wrote a letter to the president with saying exactly what Louis just said. I wrote a letter to the president a year ago after hearing him speak at his first State of the Union. Then we had a conference with the Republicans at the White House, and he said that he couldn't work with Republicans because we're going to reject everything he proposed outright. And I said, there's three things you can propose. You can propose tax reform, you can propose regulatory reform, and more energy independence. And we as freshmen, I can promise you, we will work with you on these things. And I said, and besides, this is going to be good for you, because if the economy improves, you're actually going to get the credit for it, and at least we're actually saving the nation, and it doesn't matter who gets the credit. I never heard from him, and he was never willing to work with us on that. But there are things that we actually agree on, and we should be doing that. But instead, what they have decided to do is to make this an election and a time about demagoguery instead of a time about real solutions in America.
John Stanton with Roll Call. I was wondering if you all could maybe talk a little bit about Defensive Marriage Act. It's an issue that's obviously come up again. Representative Huelskamp has an amendment that's going to be offered on the PGS bill today. If I could see your thoughts on his amendment and sort of on the general state of play on that.
John, I appreciate that, and hopefully we'll have opportunity to offer that later today, maybe the next day, that would frankly instruct the administration, particularly the Department of Justice, to amazingly ask them to actually follow the law. The Defensive Marriage Act is the law of the land. I was not here. I think Louis might have been here at that time. It was passed, signed by President Bill Clinton. That is the law of the land. And it's unprecedented. We would have an attorney general that would walk away in the middle of a lawsuit and refuse to defend a duly passed law of this Congress and this presidency, and simply instructs no funds will be used to not follow the law. And I go home and folks say, well, you really have to tell them that? I said, well, yeah, I guess I do. And but clearly it's after the vote in North Carolina last night, and the recent comments by the Vice President would suggest they really don't care about the law. And so hopefully this amendment will go on. We'll try to carry it through the process. But again, frankly, where the vast majority of American people are at. Follow the law, Mr. President and Mr. Attorney General.
I would like someone to ask Jim Corney to clarify his comments. I think in light of North Carolina's decision, as he said just before the election, that public opinion has swayed in the defense of marriage. And I don't know if he understood which way the public was swaying, because 38 states have passed this. So I don't know, they do their math real funny over at the White House, but if any of y'all in the White House press corps, maybe y'all could clarify that.
Well, maybe his math is evolving. I like his position. I mean, those are the things that most Americans, I mean, they're tired of that. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, you can't hold a position day to day. I mean, that's the silliness. And that's the political danger that people in this town, including the president, find themselves in when they can't take a position. So my people say, take a position and stick with it more than depending on what your press spokesman says every day.
And I was on the bench at the time I was a judge, and it makes me all the more astounded that people are not willing to follow the law. And I told Ted Poe he had asked the stupidest question I've ever heard asked in a hearing since I've been here 7.25 years. Eric Holder had just sued Arizona over their immigration law, and Ted's next to me. He asked the stupid question, did you read the law, Arizona law, just 10 pages, you read it before you sued Arizona? That was the stupidest, of course he did. And then he answered, no, I didn't read it. So anyway, I'm not sure which was more stupid, the answer or the question, but this is an administration that just goes off suing over laws they don't even read. But I guess after they were going to find out what was in it after they sued.
Just adding to that, and I was in that Judiciary Committee hearing as well, and I had asked Eric Holder. By the way, we got the announcement that Arizona was going to, or that the federal government was going to sue Arizona. That came from the Secretary of State's press conference in Ecuador, if you remember. And then it echoed through the White House, and then Eric Holder came before the Judiciary Committee, and I asked him, is your intent to sue? And the answer was yes, or at least he assented to that allegation. And then I asked him, how does Arizona's immigration law, SB 1070, violate the Constitution? No answer. Is there any federal statute that controls here that you can point to? No, he couldn't. Was there any controlling case law that he could point to? No, he couldn't. And then subsequently to that, we got the question, did you read the bill? And I agreed. Dumbest question with the most mileage I've ever seen in 10 years here in Congress. I point out that with the dumb question is what came from the background, that the public does not have a lot of patience for an executive branch of government or a judicial branch, and probably not a legislative branch that doesn't follow the law. And I know we had a DOMA law, and I was one of the authors of it. And we had the 7 Supreme Court justices in the state threw out the DOMA law on the grounds that they had found rights in the Constitution that were up to this point unimagined. And that's a quote from their decision. 3 of them came up for retention. They were voted off the bench. Now we have an attorney general that won't follow the law, and the voters will have an alternative in November if the pressure doesn't get so great before then. So I just wanted to chime in on that piece and thank my friend from Texas for, and he'll thank me for not bringing up the fair tax and his flat tax.
Yep, Matt. Sure. Matt Trover with CNS News. Saw a lot of hands go up earlier in opposition to the Ex-Im Bank, and I know Congressman Mulaney mentioned that leadership had basically said no, thank you. I just wanted to give folks an opportunity to explain why they were opposed. Is it just a more principled thing that it's, some people call it welfare, or is it because these reforms were not included?
I think all of the above. I think it is corporate welfare. I think, it's a 40% increase in what I think all of us view as a skewing of the marketplace. So for a host of reasons, I think the argument we're hearing is that this bill is a move to phase it out. So this would be the first time I've ever seen you increase something 40% on your way to phasing it out. So I think there's a host of reasons why we're opposed to it, but the fundamental reason is we just don't think we should be in this business, particularly at the time when we got a $16 trillion debt.
Let me add, it's corporate welfare.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. And Republicans used to believe in economic freedom. So let's get back to that.
Paul Krozak at CQ. Are you all happy with the sequester replacement legislation that you'll be voting on tomorrow?
I probably am different than most of the people on this panel. I'm not terribly happy with it. I'll vote for it because I always vote for anything that reduces spending. But I think we're losing moral authority as Republicans if we say that there's something that's not on the table. And if we keep defending just one area, and in this case defense, and I know many of my friends are going to disagree with me, but if we keep just protecting defense contractors and the defense industry, but saying that they're off the table and we can't reduce spending in the Defense Department, but we have to reduce spending in all these other areas, we're actually becoming the caricature that the Democrats are painting.
Well, that same argument applies to the Ex-Im Bank.
Exactly.
Well, and look, it's a facade. I mean, come on. This is a smokescreen to protect people who voted to raise the debt ceiling, okay, and to create the super committee. I like the cuts. Why we couldn't have had those cuts last year? Why do we have to play these games and go, what are we now, almost 8 months later, to finally start recognizing that we have to make these cuts? This is all it is. And so, yes, I'm leaning towards voting for it because I believe in the cuts, but I hate to have to clean up after we told people that bill was going to be a failure. But this is all this is. This is electioneering, grandstanding, so that certain members out there have cover for the mistake that they made back in August or in July.
How do you really get?
Let me add, no, I'm not happy with it. The discretionary spending for 2013 is supposed to be $950 billion. That's the law. That's the law that was passed. That's the law that was agreed to in order to raise the debt ceiling. We're not going to be there. So we can talk about all these cuts that are going to happen down the road, but I care about the current year because that's what we control. And discretionary spending is supposed to be at $950 billion. We will be way above that.
Ben Terrace from National Journal. Earlier, Mr. Gomer, you mentioned the importance of having leverage. Democrats are talking about how, come the lame duck session, they're going to have the leverage because the expiration of the Bush tax cuts will give it to them. Do you guys have a plan for how to wrestle some of that leverage back to your side of things?
I don't know if there's a plan. Well, actually, I can answer that question. There isn't a plan, in my opinion. And had multiple discussions during debate over the budget. I am very fearful of what happens at the end of the year. We'll have the single largest tax increase not only in American history, but I believe world history. If nothing happens, this president will get a huge, massive tax increase. And it's incumbent upon Republicans to actually have a plan and pass that before the election, to actually have a budget before the election, actually have a way to deal with the debt ceiling increase that's going to happen right after the election. And so we're searching for a plan in order to avoid that. My fear is it's not what happens politically. It's what happens in the economy with the uncertainty of all these things facing us in lame duck hell in that time between the election and January 20th, 2013, no matter who the president is, it's all lame duck here. And I don't see a plan to do with that, but I've introduced a bill that said, hey, let's make at least the Bush of all the tax cuts permanent. If you don't want to do that, extend it for 1 year. I believe the speaker indicated yesterday if you want to have that vote, that's at least in progress. We should have been committed to do that a long time ago. We should have already had that vote, because that's fearful to me what happens at the end of the year in that lame duck hell.
And you touched on one of my concerns. Think about it. If we do, as I'm hopeful will occur, just as Raúl had said, we keep the House, we get a majority in the Senate, maybe get the White House, and then we have a lame duck session. I'm quite concerned we'll have a repeat of 2 years ago. All these reinforcements are coming, so we better rush to make a deal with the Democrats now. Are you kidding? We would have all kinds of leverage. We go, look, you do a deal now in December before the tax increases, the biggest tax increase in history happens, or we'll come in January 4th and we'll do it and you won't be able to stop it, and it will be, even more of what you don't want. So certainly we should have leverage in December, and we ought to use it to effectively help the country get out of this recession instead of still dancing around at 16% unemployment when you consider all the people that have given up and not applied anymore.
If I may, Congressman Gomer mentioned fairness earlier in reference to a flat tax. Do you think that conservatives are doing a good enough job of conveying the moral case for policies as opposed to just the numbers that backstop them?
I think we need to do a better job. And I think, as you know, there's some writers out there who are talking about the moral case for conservative principles. And I try to do that every time I speak, because I'm a conservative, because I think conservative policies have actually made my life better. I grew up in a single parent home. I was an only child. And it was my mother teaching me that I had to believe in myself and actually do something for myself that brought me to where I am today. You have too many people in government who think that these individuals out there, they cannot act for themselves, and if the government doesn't supply goodies for them, that they're not going to survive. And what that creates is a dependent class. That's why I'm a conservative. And when I speak about conservatism, I think about this system is more fair. And you look at Obama's policies. Under Obama, there's more poor people, more Hispanics, more minorities, more African Americans in poverty. There's more people on food stamps. What is fair about that system? There's absolutely nothing fair about that system. And I think as conservatives, we should do a better job, because we tend to talk about numbers, statistics, and you know what? The American people get bored with that information, but they do want to know whether their lives are better today than they were 4 years ago, and whether they will be better 4 years from now than they are today. And I believe under our policies they will be, and we can show that.
I think we've done an inadequate job of making the moral case for repealing Obamacare, for example. And we've picked it apart, nuanced it here and there. We talked about the economics of it. but very seldom do you hear on the floor of the House of Representatives a full-throated objection to the unconstitutional takings of American liberty and what that does to sap the vitality that Raúl talked about. Another one of those pieces, let's see, the Obamacare piece is one. Another one would be the school loan. We had the debate on student interest and the discussion about whether it's $12 or $30 or $40,000 an average student loan when someone gets out of college, and the interest rate on that was the risk of doubling. But very little discussion about the burden on every American, and now it's gone over $50,000 for each one of us, and only half of us paying taxes. So if you're a taxpayer, your share is $102,000. And what does that do to diminish American liberty and American freedom? That's just two big issues in front of us that we haven't done a very good job of articulating. And I think you brought up a point that we really need to focus on that. Danny Haskell used to say, first you win the debate, then you win the vote. And we're winning some votes, but I think we need to work harder on the debate.
Let me add one other thing. I want to congratulate Chairman Paul Ryan for actually taking the debate and the battle out to areas that you wouldn't expect that. But more of us need to do that. It's fine to have a great debate around here, but Ronald Reagan didn't change the country up here. I mean, it was years and years of going out on the road and telling us what's the American ideal and actually showing folks the issues of fairness. What's fair, for example, about the fact we've gone from 19 million American seniors on food stamps to 44.7 million. There's nothing fair about that. Every American says that's not right. And they're not saying we got to go to 50. What they're saying is we need to get our economy moving and those kind of things. So I'm disappointed. That's why I think many of us go out and do town halls, actually get out beyond our districts and get out of this town and actually spread the message of the reality is it's conservative policies that are actually passionate, actually save families and save businesses and grow our American economy. And that's the dream, that's the ideal. But I have to tell you, most folks I talk to at home, they think it's still alive, but just barely. And they're afraid a few more years it's totally will slip through the fingers.
And Steve brought up the president telling people don't double our interest rates. We should be telling the president don't double our debt. Since he took office, our debt has increased 50%. That's the real crime. The more we have debt, the more it's going to cause inflation, and that's going to hit the poor. So the policies we have in place that lead to more debt are going to hurt the poor more than anyone else.
And when you look at what the president has proposed, Obamacare cut Medicare by $500 billion, and then they demagogue us as wanting to push grandma off a cliff. People I know here in Congress want such a great health care system that grandma will hang glide off of the cliff, not be pushed off in a wheelchair. But that's not what this president's done.
You know, I'll just say this is, the federal government shouldn't have this much drama. The federal government really should be boring because there's 18 enumerated powers in the United States Constitution that we should deal with. And all this other stuff, Obamacare and raising taxes and debt, really should not be an issue. I mean, the fact of the matter, it is, but if we get back to the founders, it should be more boring than it is.
Time for one more?
Yeah.
Mark.
Mr. Goldman, I know you've had some concerns about the FBI's counterterrorism training program, and I believe the director testified in front of your committee this morning. Did he have anything interesting to say?
Well, I expressed concerns with the director about the 3 subject matter experts that we understand were not part of the FBI or the Department of Justice. Wanted to know who they were. We have seen the email from the Islamic Society of North America, which is a named co-conspirator in which in the Holy Land Foundation trial, where the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said there's plenty of evidence to support that they supported terrorism. And so to have this administration not only not pursue them, but to have an FBI agent, department that has bent over so backwards to make it appear that, gee, not only are we not being prejudicial, we're bringing in people who support terrorism to work with us, I just don't think is the right way to go. And I did read the director a litany of mistakes that have been made by the FBI where they wanted to give awards or recognize people for their help, and then it turned out they were supporting terrorism and it wasn't a good idea. We know, for example, we have people like one gentleman that Secretary Napolitano has on the Homeland Security Advisory Group, Council, that she gave a secret security clearance when we know enough about it. There's no way they followed the law and gave him a security clearance. So we have great concerns. We also know, and I've asked Eric Holder, could you let us see the boxes of documents that you had and provided in the Holy Land Foundation trial, since those were given to what were convicted of supporting terrorism? So the terrorists have these documents. Why are you so afraid of letting Congress have the documents you gave to terrorists? And we haven't gotten an answer, and I'd still like to see those boxes of documents. I'm still gravely concerned that we've got the wrong people in the hen house guarding the hens and dictating policy.
And the other thing on that, Louis, is the disappearing language of terror. If you look at the lexicons of FBI and the National Counterterrorism Group, and you compare that to the 9/11 Commission report, where they talk about all the jihadists, they talk about Muslim Brotherhood, they talk about Al-Qaeda, and now they don't. They don't talk about them all. I think you've got to identify the enemy if you're ever going to defeat an enemy. And so I would point you guys toward, Frank Gaffney's points to that in one of his books as well. So anyway.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
If you're hungry, we have some more Chick-fil-A up front. And if you haven't signed in already, right outside.